Okay. We're going to do a magical escape on the thing there. Now, can you advance it? That's what I'm looking for. What button did you push? Did you say an incantation? This is the triple bottom line Gary was talking about. Healthy people, healthy economy, healthy environment, or people, prosperity, and planet. I'm going to talk about the leg we sometimes lead out, the people piece, because I think public health is another arrow in the quiver that we are not taking full advantage of. So you're going to get a lot from that sector of the conversation, my perspective. How do we build a healthier community? And indeed, I'm going to suggest to you that when I start this conversation, I get a little bit of pushback, and it's kind of embodied in these 4 common questions. When I say, we can build healthier communities where people live longer, healthier lives, and it aligns with building a more sustainable community, they say, yeah, but really, Mark, in the end, isn't personal health a matter of personal responsibility? It's the decisions and habits. We choose to eat a good diet, we choose to exercise or not, and if we don't, well, that's our own business, right? Right? Not so much. I'm going to make a strong case to you that it's not just a matter of personal decisions and habits, and that the environment, our entire community design has much to do with it. And then people will say to me, Mark, let's say I build that kind of community. Is there any evidence that it actually will change behavior and make people healthier? That they'll live longer, healthier lives? If we build it, will they come? Is often how I get that. And my answer is going to be yes, and I'm going to prove that to you. And so let's say I bring you along, but then you're going to say this. You're going to say, if you're like the average American, you say, but Mark, we are a capitalist society. If that's really the case, then shouldn't the free market be taking us there? If it's such a good idea to build these healthier, more sustainable communities, shouldn't they be what the economy steers us toward, right? If they work better, that's what the free market should take us to. I'm going to remind you that I believe that it is, in fact, taking us there. And if you buy all of that, then you'll close with, okay, so how do we get there? Our community is really able to do it. And of course, we're hearing examples like that of Grand Rapids and others. But I think my standard would be the picture in the top right there. Could that ever become normal? Could that not be the unusual photo that I took in Seattle, Washington of the mom who bikes her kids to school, not drives them to school? There's the big lineup of 60 cars dropping off in front of that elementary school, and here's this mom who weaves her way in with a bike. Could she not be the outlier? She sees the battle that we won, but the war is lost when there's 40 cars lined up behind her, right? Right? Because sure, her carbon footprint is tiny, but the carbon footprint of the other 50 cars behind her, we've lost the war. Agreed? So can we win the war, not just the battle of convincing her to do the right thing? I'm going to ask you to start with a little perspective on this. I think regarding the first question, this question of personal responsibility, we can start by thinking back to our youth. So do this favor for me. Close your eyes right now, really close them, and think back to your earliest fond recollection of having been physically active as a youngster. And I'm talking as far back as you can remember. I'm not talking high school sports. Go back to when you were a really little kid. And think about being active, think about the environment, who were you with, what were you doing, where physically were you? Really close your eyes and picture it for a second. Those of you with your eyes open, I'm looking at you right now, come on. All right, got that image? All right, now, take 10 seconds, turn to the person next to you, share those recollections right now. Tell the person next to you, what were you thinking about? Go. Take the next 45 minutes and have those conversations with each other. People get animated. I watch you guys. People's energy goes up. They start acting stuff out. They talk about climbing trees and swimming in the quarry that they weren't even supposed to be at, and playing in the dirt and a pile of dirt, and being out in the woods and far from where anybody knew where you were. I'm going to ask a series of questions about your recollections. I want you to raise your hand if your answer is affirmative regarding your recollections. So if what I'm talking about refers to what you recall. How many of you remembered things that occurred only at a scheduled time and place? Hand up if it was scheduled time and place. How many remembered things where you were only with kids of the same age and gender? So you were a 12-year-old girl, you were only with 12-year-old girls. How many remembered things there had to be an adult present to do the activity? How many remembered activities which required a uniform that you had to buy or were given to be on the organization? How many remembered activities that required an umpire or a referee or somebody like that to be present to do it? How many remembered things where you were with kids of different ages and different genders? So it might have been boys and girls, older and younger, different range, the pickup game in the neighborhood that people were talking about. How many remembered things where there did not necessarily have to be an adult present? How many had those kind of recollections? How many actually could not have gotten away with what they were doing if the adult had been present? Tell the truth. Let me see those hands. This is not raising your hand, by the way. This is I'm lazy. Elbow as high as your ear when you raise your hand. So, should not have been doing it. Come on, let's see. How many of you are elected officials now? How many remembered activities that used a wheeled vehicle, a bicycle, a tricycle, a scooter, a skateboard, roller skates, the old kind with a key maybe? How many of those? How about water? So fishing in a stream, playing in a creek, swimming in a pond, skating on a frozen pond. Who remembers that, right? Water is part of your recollection. How many of you, allow me to use a term of art that is familiar perhaps in this context, how many remember having been to some degree or another a free-range kid? I was sort of a free-range kid. I could disappear on a Saturday morning and my mom would not know where I was, on my bike with buddies. I lived in upstate New York along the Erie Canal, small town along there. We would go ride along the canal towpath trail for hours and then be told to be home in time for dinner or when the street lights came on. Didn't we have a street light sort of environment in the neighborhood? How many had a spot that the kids kind of in your neighborhood went to, a sand lot, an empty ball field, an empty space that was where you played the pickup games, a wiffle ball, stick ball, kick the can, any of those? All right, good. Last two questions are the most important, so listen carefully. How many of you believe the majority of kids growing up today are free-range kids? The majority, across America, free-range kids. Huh, it's interesting. Last question. How many think it's good for the health of America's youth, the kids that are growing up today, that they're not free-range kids? It's great, we're growing a healthier generation by them not being free-range. Let's see hands for that. Well, let's think about what we just said. We said as recently as a generation or two ago, we had a lot of free-range kids. It's not that long ago, we're just not that old in this room, are we? I mean, honestly, 2 generations maybe. And we agree there are not so many now, and it's obviously not good for them. To which I have one simple question. What precisely are you going to do about it? Not theoretically, not sort of, well, I feel badly about this. What are you going to do about it? Because if you don't have an answer, take a walk right now. Because that's what we should be working on. You want to build a healthier, sustainable community. We could restore a world for free-range kids. We know we'd be getting it right on all sorts of vectors. And by the way, I'm not particularly smart. There are a lot smarter people than I. Writing about this, researching this, a guy named Richard Blue wrote a wonderful book called Last Child, in the Woods, in which he decries what he calls nature deficit disorder for a generation of kids that just don't spend time outside. Shane Gould, when I spoke at the Australian National Physical Activity Conference a couple of years ago, she came out, she's a child health advocate, former Olympic swimmer, who said, look, I think kids are actually held back by over-organized play. You're starting to see this in the research literature now, where people are questioning, so where do kids develop the inventiveness and creativity of making up their own games like we used to do when there's no grown-up there to tell them? How about the negotiation skills of dealing with it when they have a disagreement? Again, there's no umpire or referee. How about the leadership skills, picking teams, being captains? Kids growing up today, you as community leaders probably started doing that when you were 6 years old as a free-range kid. Kids today not getting any of that. And by the way, when we ask parents, why don't you let your kid be free-range? Why can't your kid roam, take off on a bike on Saturday morning, walk to school every day from 4th grade on, like Mark Fenton did with just a group of friends, no adult supervision, and walked home on the shortcut, which in fact took us by a creek that we wanted to play in every afternoon. It was longer, right? But that's because that's what we did. We were free-range. When we ask parents, why can't you let your kids do that? What's their answer? It's not safe. Or, my God, there are terrifying, scary men with big, thick mustaches hiding behind every tree. The mustache men are out there, right? Ready to pluck our kids from the street. To which I ask you one important question. Does anybody know, as an aside here, the actual increase in violent crime against kids by people who don't know them over, let's pick the last 30 or 40 years. Let's pick the time period from about 1970 to 2000, the time period in which, by the way, as you look at this graph here, the percentage of kids walking and bicycling to school, the green bars, dropped from about 40% to only about 14%, and the percentage of kids being driven to school by car went from 15% to almost half. An almost direct reversal, 30 years, and increase in violent crime against kids over that time period was actually what? Oh, by the way, another interesting thing happened over that time period. Anybody know what it is? Happens to be the same time in which childhood obesity rates tripled. Coincidence? Absolutely not! As we got in the habit of throwing our kids into the back seat of the car for every trip, this is what we did to them. And by the way, you tell me, what's the increase in violent crime? You guys know already the answer. What is it?
Down.
Oh, say it. 0. If anything, down. We can find no evidence. What is different? The media. Amber Alert in California. You hear about it in Michigan. By the way, I'm a parent of a 15-year-old girl, 18-year-old son. I had to go through the scary years of them becoming free range, letting them walk to the movie theater alone. I get all of that. I know there are neighborhoods where kids are, in fact, not safe. And indeed, what I further note is it's not often the mustache, the scary imaginary mustache man. It's the big wide road. Multiple lanes of traffic with a higher traffic volume and higher speeds than the ones you crossed when you were a kid being free range. And the good news is I actually know how to do something about that, as opposed to some imaginary threat that's not even really there, right? So I admit that the dynamics are different. But my point is this. I don't think we should just throw our hands up in despair and throw kids in the backseat of the car for every trip. Maybe what we should try to do is rebuild our world so that those kids can be free range again, because we're hearing about what the implications are from a health standpoint. And a quick side note on my opening rant here regarding what we were calling the obesity epidemic, what misses the main point. That's not what we should be talking about from a public health standpoint. It's well illustrated by that special issue of Time magazine. There was about a disease that we used to in the health community called adult onset diabetes. Does anybody know what the clinical term for adult onset diabetes is? Type 2. Why don't we call it adult onset anymore? Because we see it in 9 and 10-year-olds. This is a disease that the health community 15 years ago would have told you you couldn't get as a kid. It didn't physiologically happen. We now see it in 9-year-olds, the young lady on the front of the magazine there. And what we know is that the two underlying risk factors that are driving this now epidemic, this disease that they tell us 1 in 3 kids born today will have in their lifetimes. That's what the CDC is estimating. Let me say it again. 1 in 3 kids being born today will end up with this in their lifetime. A disease we thought you couldn't get till you were 50 or 60 years old, right? The two underlying behaviors, physical inactivity and poor nutrition. Living a sedentary lifestyle and not eating a healthy diet. Indeed, I would suggest to you, those are the two epidemics we should talk about. And whenever I get a chance to do media and I'm interviewed, or when I give legislative testimony as I did to the Massachusetts State House just 2 days ago before I came here, I talk about those twin epidemics because those are the two things we can do something about. We can help provide healthier, high-quality food sources closer to home, and we can give kids opportunities to be free-range again if we think about how we design and build our communities, if we build them more sustainably, right? So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Quick side note, brief editorial comment on the discourse going on in Washington, D.C. Anybody who is arguing about whether Obamacare is a good or a bad idea, whether we need a single-payer system or a market-based system or some hybrid, which is what we have now, is absolutely missing the fundamental point. They really are. Talking about how we pay is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, while it steams right into the iceberg, because it is the underlying risk behaviors of tobacco use, physical inactivity, and poor nutrition, which are going to continue to drive up healthcare costs, irrelevant of how we pay for it. And until we do something about those 3 behaviors, all this other stuff is baloney. So, and you can be saying that to the legislators. I'm not even taking a political position. I'm just telling you, whatever side of that on, they're talking about the wrong thing if they don't talk about prevention. Okay? So take that to your legislators. Now, I'm going to admit some bias. You're going to hear more about the physical activity than the nutrition side of the equation, not because it's more important. It's my area of expertise and work. So you're going to get more of that. In fact, I have a background in competitive sports, if you can call it that. I actually did the weirdest of all competitive sports. Back in my day, I worked at places like the U.S. Olympic Training Center and Reebok Human Performance Lab. So I kind of started my world in the world of sports science and exercise promotion. We were going to convince everybody to go exercise. Now, I did the weirdest event in all of track and field. Who knows what the goofiest looking event they do in track and field is? It's got to be race walking. That's right, speed walking. There's actual photographic evidence of me back in the day, as you can tell, a very long time ago, because we only had black and white photography back then. And the other giveaway is that those shorts were in style back when I was competing. This being, of course, the 1928 National Championship. Many people will ask, dude, sort of, why, of all the events you might have chosen, if you're a good endurance athlete, why didn't you run the marathon? Why the race walk? And it's obvious when I show you the next slide. Of course, it was the huge crowds that showed up in our competition. And this being, of course, the start, not making this up now, the start of the 1984 Olympic trials of the 50-kilometer race walk. Now, 50 kilometers is 31 miles. So it's 5 miles longer than the marathon. And like the marathon run, they start you very early in the morning. This is the LA Coliseum. Los Angeles Coliseum, LA hosted the 84 games. They also hosted the 84 trials. We started on the stadium track, and then like the marathon runners, you go out and do a loop in the city, and then you come back and finish on the track. So at 10 in the morning, when we finished, the stadium was actually packed because the real events were going on, like the mile and the shot put and stuff. But at 6 in the morning, if you look very, very closely to the Kodak sign on the far side of the track, you can in fact see my mom and dad right there. And that's really them. My mom is, way to go, sweetheart, looking good. Just 30 miles to go, honey. Thanks, Mom. Yeah. So I tell you, I come from that world of sport and competitive thing. That's what we thought. We thought we were going to convince everybody to sort of be active. But in fact, I can boil the public health data on the physical activity epidemic, inactivity epidemic, really to 3 numbers. So you don't have to learn lots of data to understand the problem here. 30, 20, 365. In fact, I literally teach people when we're doing community workshops and they're going to go in and do testimony about something like the Complete Streets bill, we'll say, look, walk in with these 3 in your pocket. You want to say 30. That's the minutes per day we're told every American should be moderately physically active. You don't have to train for a marathon. You can get out for a half-hour daily walking. By the way, the data tells us that physical activity is an independent risk factor. So even if weight doesn't change, if you don't lose a lot of weight, if you're getting that half an hour of activity a day, you're decreasing your risk for most of the stuff that kills us now. We know kids need more like an hour a day, and again, minimum recommendations. They need more than 20. Well, that's the percentage of Americans that are actually getting the 30 minutes per day or 60 minutes per day on any kind of a regular basis through, consciously going to the gym, what we call leisure time physical activity. The 365, well, what must that be? Days of the year, you would think. Actually add 3 zeros, and you have a dramatically frightening estimate of the number of premature deaths annually in the United States due to physical inactivity and poor nutrition. The only thing that kills more Americans prematurely is tobacco and how it manifests through healthcare. And here's the real problem, through sickness. And here's the real problem. Deaths associated with tobacco have plateaued and are beginning to drop, while inactivity and poor nutrition deaths continue to rise. Next time they run these numbers, we'll find that the number 1 cause of premature death and disability in our society will be physical inactivity and poor nutrition. We need to be able to bring that to bear on every conversation that we have about urban design and planning, because that's where the story is, as far as I'm concerned. Now, the 30 minutes per day comes from national guidelines, exhaustive review of the research literature, but the really important takeaway is this: it doesn't have to be structured exercise. The most notable thing is that those folks walking down Michigan Avenue, if they are getting 15 minutes of walking to work in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening home, they're getting the benefit. They will be at reduced risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, clinical depression, dementia in old age, a growing list of cancers. Essentially, that moderate daily physical activity, even done informally and broken up throughout the day, is as close as we found to the magic bullet for a long, healthy life. That's it. That's the good news. The bad news is this estimate of the percentage that actually get it. The yellow line is that estimate, and you'll notice 2 things, or I'll tell you 2 things about it. One, it's actually not 20%. This is based on self-report data that the Centers for Disease Control collects, and we know that people tend to tell you what they want to hear when you're on a survey. So when you're talking to them on the phone, they tend to eat more fruits and vegetables, they tend to exercise more, they are also taller and weigh less than if you actually measure it in real life. Not making that up. They've done validation studies. Number 2, look at the graph, you guys. It's flat for the last 20 years. Whatever we have been doing to get people to be more physically active is clearly not working. We are guys like me, running around TV shows, videos, all this stuff, books. I'm talking to hear my own lips flap, because I've clearly not changed behavior at the national level. We are not being successful focusing just on behavior change. Why? Well, here's the last bit of public health geekness that I'm going to give you. I think it's the stickiness problem, and I think it's why we need stickier communities, and I think it's well illustrated by a simple study that one guy did, but there are many of these now. This was an intervention trial where they were trying to get people to walk 40 minutes a day, and there were 3 groups in the study. One group was told, walk your 40 minutes all at once. One group was told they could break it into 4 10-minute walks when it was convenient. And the third group was told not only could they break it into 4 10-minute walks, but they put a treadmill in their house that they could go jump on anytime they wanted, SBT, short bouts with treadmill. So the 6 months of intervention. They call them on the phone, they send them email reminders, they teach them how to warm up before they're walking, how to stretch afterwards, and how to select good walking shoes so they don't get injured. They collect their little exercise diaries, and if they've been doing their walking, they give them prizes like t-shirts and water bottles. Because oh, how we love to give away t-shirts and water bottles, right? Right when we do events and promotions, those of you that work in sort of, think of bike to work week and walk to school day, t-shirts, water bottles, baseball hats, fanny bags, put your hands up if you've been involved in the giving of gifts for people to do the better behavior. Hands up. Now, come on. You're telling me you've never done a health fair or a sustainability thing where down there at the tables we've got pens and squeeze balls, right? Put the hands up if you've been involved in the proffering of gifts. Let's go. That's more like it, including food, by the way. Food counts. We do that all the time. Because it works, by the way. Look, over the 6-month intervention, all those people increased their exercise minutes per week. From a public health standpoint, unfortunately, that's not the interesting question. The interesting question is after the event is over, after the health fair, after the walk to school day or bike to work week or you know, eat your fruits and vegetables initiative, or what does it do? Does it continue to improve? Does it plateau or does it drop off? Everybody's going to vote for one of those 3 arrows, and I'm going to give you inside information, which is this. At 6 months, they measured statistically significant increases in aerobic fitness and decreases in weight. Let me say it again. These people, after just 6 months of daily moderate walking, were losing weight and getting healthier. Got it? Now, vote for one of the arrows. How many think they continue to increase their physical activity? Huh, that's a bummer. How many think they at least maintained it? They've gotten 6 months was long enough to get the positive biofeedback. Excellent. So we've established a habit, they stay with it. How many believe it dropped off? All right, you're all losers because you have a bad attitude and you have to leave right now. I should cast you all out, but for one tiny thing, which is, of course, that you're right. We don't have lots of this data, but that which we have, you see, because usually we just declare victory at 6 months. We say, oh, good, they're exercising more. Hey, they rode their bikes during bike to work week. And we don't measure after the fact. Was there any sustained change in behavior? But when we do, this is what it looks like. It does not stick, hence the stickiness problem. Behavior change alone, just educating, encouraging, small, short-term incentives, is not enough. We have to do more. We have to get it, make it sticky. And I believe we know how to make it sticky, and that is by not making it a special thing, being on a diet, being on an exercise program, but indeed having it a part of daily life. The routine being to eat more healthfully all the time, because that's readily available and affordable and reasonable to do. Being physically active, because it's actually cheaper to ride my bike downtown than to try to park there, right? I mean, that's the model, that we make those sustainable choices. Now, I have an approach. I will be someday famous for this. This is an acronym for it. They will call it the Fenton PAPI program, I think. And I'm looking for a community to pilot it. Mayor Hartwell, I'm thinking you guys are ready, so I'm just going to say you get talk with me afterwards if you'd like to do it. It stands for Physical Activity Promotion Through Predator Introduction. I think this is going to be huge. See, because you're going to get a lot of this kind of physical activity. Looking over your shoulder and running at very high speed. Kind of anaerobic, admittedly. This is going to be big. I actually presented this at the Centers for Disease Control. True story. I actually stuck this in a big talk I was giving down there. And one of the doctors, a friend of mine, says, Fenton, that's kind of interesting, because it's sort of Darwinian, isn't it? I said, that's right, because you don't have to be able to run faster than the bear, just the person you're with. You knew that was coming, right? We're just going to call the less active from the herd. Sadly, I can't get no funding for a pilot program. So instead, I'm going to have to go with what the research literature tells me. And what the research in sort of behavioral psychology says, you can't just focus on the individual's motivation and skills. That's important, that's a piece of the solution, but instead we've got to take what is called a full socio-ecological approach. It is the very heart of the sustainability movement, I would argue, to think about more than just saying, here, recycle, it's good for you, but let's build an entire system where all of the cues reward you for doing the right thing. Right? And they tell you to do the right thing. So you operate at the personal and interpersonal level, schools and workplaces and healthcare providers, the community by its physical infrastructure, even public policy. And one of the interesting things about this, when I start to talk about this to the public health people, they go, wow, that's hard, because I got to tell you, I know how to do a 12-week walking program, give out water bottles and pedometers and t-shirts and stuff. I know how to do a 1-week walk, bike to work week. It's like, boy, when you're talking about it, it sounds to me like I got to strike bike lanes. I got to be down at the bottom of the pyramid and change laws and ordinances, maybe what our parking policies are, and build the facilities for people to bike to work all the time, not just for the 1 week. And if you think about it, the easy stuff to do is at the top of the pyramid. The stuff that has population level, sticky impact is at the bottom, right? So if you want stickiness, you got to move down to the base of the socio-ecological pyramid. And we have great examples of this, many of them from public health. Certainly the change in the norms around tobacco use, right? We don't just say don't smoke, it's bad for you. We make it hard to smoke in public places. We tax the daylights out of the product. My kids, I as a competitive athlete back in the day had to ask for a non-smoking seat on an airplane. Do you guys remember what that meant? You could well be one row in front of the smoking section, no divider, nothing, and I'm smoking secondhand smoke all the way to attract me, right? My kids will never experience that, not because when I get on an airplane, I say, hey, would you mind not smoking? It'd be nice, we have kids. It's because it's the law. And they'll land the airplane and state troopers will drive them off the plane if the flight attendant says so, right? That's a little different than just asking. But I would argue we could say the same about things like child safety restraints and seatbelt use. We could talk about the entire recycling movement. We'll have discussions about this kind of stuff all day. Let me give a great example. How about waterborne illness? How about the fact that Haiti is still suffering a tragic right now cholera epidemic? And we don't see cholera epidemics, great outbreaks in the United States. You tell me why. Why doesn't cholera just happen regularly in the U.S.? Why? Because we have laws. We actually have clean water laws. And I sat 6 years on my local planning board, an elected official. I was chair for a while. And I'm telling you, we did exhaustive review of the stormwater and the septic or the sewer requirements when a new subdivision was coming in, right? We exhaustively reviewed that. We bring in third parties to make sure they were meeting standards of performance. If a developer, in fact, let me give an example. If a developer would come in and say, hey, we're just coming out of the recession, Mark. Times are tight. We really want to get the economy going. Again, we're going to do this 25-house subdivision. But it's really expensive, and because of the recession, we're tight on dollars. Would you be okay if we didn't do the sidewalks? It's in the ordinance, but could we save a few bucks and not do that sidewalk, especially that trail that connects to the nearby trail? What often will a local board say? Sure. If they had said the same thing and said, hey, we want to save a few bucks, we'd like to go with open pit toilets and latrines out behind the houses to save on the sewer hookups, what would we say? Because the law says no, and indeed we have the power of regulation to keep them from doing it. Why wouldn't we say the same thing about the dang sidewalk, is my question. Because we should. It's just as important. It is a public health imperative. We have data, by the way, from the cigarette world, I think is the most compelling. If you look at per capita cigarette consumption, all you have to know is that per capita cigarette consumption versus time over the last 100 years. And you'll notice the downward trend in that graph did not occur back in 1950 when we knew cigarettes killed us and we told people that. It happened when we changed public policy and made it hard to smoke in public places and tax the product. That's when you start to see the drop. That's a socio-ecological success, and it is exactly the model we've got to take regarding sustainability and physical activity. On the nutrition side, I find many people get this intuitively. They go, got it. So you're saying that's why we're arguing about getting the vending machines out of our schools and putting in healthier choices, connecting schools with local farm production, and rethinking sort of how much fast food we want in our neighborhoods and how many farmers markets we want. So sometimes it's intuitive for people to think about environmental change, but when they think about this, they still tend to say, so Mark, are you saying we need to put a gym in every workplace? And I'm saying, no, that's what we know. The data says that's not going to work, but for that 5 or 10%, the yellow line. What we really have to do is build a world where that picture on the lower left is the norm, where people are getting physical activity as a part of daily life. We have to build stickiness back into our communities. Okay? That's really what we're talking about. Which leads us to our second big question. You got any evidence, smarty pants, fast talking guy, that we can actually do this? That if we build it, they will come. And the short answer is yes. If you read this research literature exhaustively, as I do, I can tell you with certainty 4 things characterize environments where people are being more physically active as a part of their daily life, where they're choosing the walk, bike, transit option over the drive all the time option. Right? They're getting the physical activity by virtue of these 4 things. A greater variety of different kinds of land uses and proximity. Good network of facilities connecting those facilities. When you get to the destination, it is functional and inviting. It rewards you rather than punishes you for showing up without a car. And last but not least, it's safe and accessible for everybody in your community, all ages, all abilities, and disabilities, all income levels. Now, this for me was in fact a 4-item mental checklist for everything we permitted while I served on the planning. I always wanted to put it through this filter. If I could say yes to these 4, I knew we were going in the right direction. By the way, I'm able to illustrate everything I'm talking about with photos from here and some of the surrounding communities, some represented by those in the room, or other places where I've done work in Indiana. So the first category is really a mix of land uses. It's just what the mayor said a moment ago, where we live and shop and work and play and learn and pray, when those things are more proximate. And if you think about how we historically built, not just our big cities, but even the smallest towns in the region, right, in the Michiana region, the small crossroads main streets probably had a downtown district with at least 2-story buildings, retail and first-floor housing above. Couldn't be more mixed use than that. 2 different uses on the same parcel. Neighborhood parks, neighborhood schools, and downtown post offices and services, compact housing. That was just the norm. That's what we did, and we've sort of moved away from that for that interceding 50 years of the car-oriented culture, but we know this is there, this infrastructure is there. Second, the network of facilities. And it's not glamorous stuff. It's simple stuff like sidewalks, but yes, multi-use trails like the lovely trail along the river here. Bicycle lanes like the one we saw in Colfax yesterday. This gentleman riding there. Wish he had a helmet, but I'm glad he's riding his bike. And transit. And I mentioned transit because there is growing body of evidence that tells us regular transit riders are actually getting more daily physical activity. Right? The act of walking to and from the bus stop, or the bus route, in the case here, it actually garners them a significant portion. So we find regular transit users tend to meet my criteria for physical activity as well as a broader sustainability criteria. Third is the destination. I would argue I can take these pictures all over the United States of kind of classic auto-oriented design of the last 50 years versus stuff that really welcomed the physically active travel. Right? And there are attributes of those two. You don't have to be a landscape architect or a planner to understand that things like having the building near the street, with street trees and benches and awnings and quality bicycle parking, all those things matter. They're the incentives to the active choice. Now here's the interesting thing. I'm showing you a Walgreens because I can get pictures of this all over the United States. They are ubiquitous. So they're like an indicator species. I can use them as a character. So I'm looking at the one there in Portland, Oregon that meets all those criteria, but you will say to me, Mark, that's Portland, Oregon, which we all know is a communist enclave. A bunch of socialists live there. They can do that wacky stuff. You're in America's heartland. And here, where we don't have nearly so many communists, we get the standard offering, right? Kind of the setback on a corner, Walgreens. I know this. This is their standard template. This is, you go corporate Walgreens says this is, we want a corner parcel. We want not just 2, but 4 curb cuts. Why do they want 4 curb cuts now? What are the extra curb cuts? Where it used to be just one into the parking lot on each side. What do they need to be able to do to get around to the back side of the building? Got to have a drive-through, because God forbid I leave the seated position while I pick up my Lipitor prescription, right? I'm able to get that without actually standing up and burning any calories. So I can go over to Dunkin' Donuts and wash it down with a mega latte or something. By the way, I'll show you the bicycle parking down here. So look back. This is the good bike parking in front of this very building. But on the other side of the building, I'm suspecting where employees are parking, they're just attached to a rail there. There's this beautiful underground parking right. Could we not give away 3 or 4 of those parking spaces to create high quality, protected bicycle parking? I know of communities where they've done that. They've made that their ordinance. Take the 3 best parking spaces in that structure, make it bicycle parking, and reward the cyclist rather than punish them for having done the right thing. How hard is it? And then, by the way, we go a step further to what we should do, which is charge the market rate for that parking for the cars, but give the bike parking free. You're clearly creating, because right now, all we're doing is subsidizing anybody who wants to drive, right? That's free. If we paid the taxes to build that structure and now let you park there, we're essentially subsidizing your car trip. I'm not even saying I want to punish you. I'm just saying pay for it if you want to drive it, right? So that's the challenge we face. Now, Neenah, Wisconsin, a decidedly non-communist enclave in central Wisconsin. I mean, we're talking not Madison, which we all know is a communist enclave. Everybody got it. And I love it, by the way. But Neenah got that. They got the standard Walgreens, which is the one my mom will not want to walk to because she's got to play Froggers through the parking lot to get to the front door, right? If she gets dropped off by the bus, now that she's not driving anymore, she can't get to the front door without having to dash through the parking lot. But the next town over, Appleton, Wisconsin, also not a decidedly non-communist enclave, got that one. The building is up at the street, nice street trees and street-oriented windows and so on. It's a really different feel, and it's because they said, we're going to make you got to respect the design criteria for our downtown, our main street. We want to match that stuff. Now here's the interesting question. In the moment when they had the public hearing, and the developer said, no, I'm sorry, we can't give you that picture on the lower left. Top right is our standard. That's what we do. And if you don't like it, we're going to take our application elsewhere. What did the planning board or the city council have to be willing to say? Okay. Go right ahead. How easy is that to do if you're on an elected board? Trust me, not easy at all, because people are going to be down your throat. You are against economic development. You and your greedy communist ideas here, you're going to make them do that, and we're going to lose the Walgreens development, which brings jobs and all that good stuff. And you're undermining. So what do they need? What do our elected and appointed officials need? Just what Mike said. We need that room full of people standing up to say, Hi, Mark Fenton, 25. During the testimony period, they open the mic and say, do I have any comments from the public? Mark Fenton, 25 Crescent Ave. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. I just want to remind the board that although every American should get 30 minutes of physical activity a day, we know fewer than 1 in 5 actually do. It leads to almost 400,000 premature deaths annually due to inactivity. I want my son, who doesn't have a driver's license yet, and my mom, who's not driving anymore, to be able to safely walk to the Walgreens. Please stick to your guns on the board here and require of them that they design the Walgreens the right way, that they pass the Complete Streets Ordinance and put it in place. See what I just did there? Here's my 3 points. I made it. I stepped away. I didn't sound like a froth at the mouth, raving lunatic pounding the table. And I reminded the board, it's really not about just the hardcore, serious bicyclists in our community. It's about my mom and my kids, right? Because we've got to paint that picture. And we've got to give our elected and appointed officials that support if they're going to act courageously. Quick side note, if you're interested in the parking thing, which is a real issue for South Bend, who knows of the guy named Donald Shoupe, S-H-O-U-P-E, okay? So 2 hands, all right? A lot more people should know that in South Bend, because you got a lot of surface parking and parking garages that's driving the transportation bus. I believe, along with what Mike and the mayor said, along with the roadways, you also have to rethink what you do with the cars when they come downtown and how that happens. So take a look at Shoupe's work, because he feels that parking is the dog that is, the tail that is wagging the dog in so many of our planning and development decisions. So, the fourth of my 4 elements, safety and access. I have to be able to have everybody use the system, even somebody who's in a wheelchair, pushing a stroller, pulling a grocery cart, somebody who's visually impaired or blind. We saw lots of good accommodation on our walk here yesterday, as well as challenging areas. But I'll say this. This is where I'm going to defend my discipline. I'm an engineer by training. That's what I studied at MIT, and I got to tell you, the engineers have in their toolkit lots of cool tools, roundabouts and median islands, like the picture in the top left, curb extensions, which they've used in the downtown to change the very character of Michigan Ave, where you narrow the street at the corners and make it very easy for a pedestrian to cross, slow the traffic, slow the turning movements by changing the radius. But the point is, we have to ask for that stuff. If all we ask our engineering colleagues to do is move more cars faster, we'll get what we've gotten for the last 40 years. Wider, straighter streets, one-way roads that just move traffic through downtown, multiple left turn lanes, you know, all that horrific stuff that makes it a scary place to walk or to ride a bike. If we ask them, could you build a place where cars can move efficiently and bicyclists and pedestrians can coexist, the transit system can work well, they know how to do it. The tools are in the toolkit. An example would be this, what we're calling more and more road diets, the reduction of a 4-lane road, this over in Urbana, Illinois, University of Illinois country. On the left, 4-lane road, same road after a lane reduction, or what's called a road diet, reduces it to 3 lanes, that is 1 travel lane in each direction with a center turn lane, but now I've got room for bike lanes, and what I've actually done is removed a very common collision, which is when the car in the left lane stops, the guy behind him rear ends him or tries to go around. That goes away when I go to a center turn lane. So from an engineering standpoint, we found we actually can reduce the severity and frequency of collisions in the picture on the right, and get room for bike lanes and a center turn lane where I can put nice little islands where the pedestrians can cross. This has been a massive success, despite the fact that the business community, you can imagine what they said, you're going to take lanes away from our business district, you're going to lower traffic, you're going to kill our businesses. It's been a boon to the businesses on that road, a boon to them. Okay, Mark, this all sounds great, but you're really talking about the big cities, right? You're talking about, yeah, South Bend, places like that. What if I'm from a smaller town in the outlying area in the Michiana region? I'm going to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, the smaller communities are the front lines in this conversation. This is where it's most important, because if you look at how the population has shifted in the United States over the last 50 years or so, there's been this tremendous plummet in the rural population, and it's not been urban population that's grown. It's the suburban population. It's the people in the fringe, right? And I submit to you, it is not because people have consciously moved to neighborhoods where they say, oh, I am so psyched that I'm going to have to drive to absolutely everything. Let's move to suburbia, where we have to buy 3 cars and a minivan and spend all of our time carting kids to anything they want to do because they won't be able to walk by. I don't think that's what people were looking for. I think really what happened was the suburban model just oozed out of our cities and towns, and when we abandoned those urban cores and village centers, that's where we ended up. And so I'm going to suggest to you that the last thing we want to do is continue to take places like those and turn them into this, yet another single-use housing subdivision, distant from any of those services, the work, shop, play, learn, pray, the other part of the list, right? That the more rural parts of this region are the most important places to get ahead of it, do regional planning, and know what you want the character of your community to be 20 years from now. Okay? So don't say to me, Mark, this is all urban stuff. This is the most important. One more quick example. We're walking downtown, we see the pull-in parking, right? And I say, how comfortable is it to ride your bike behind that? We see this in a lot of mid-American towns with the big wide Main Street. How comfortable to walk behind those, or ride a bike behind those cars? Not so much, right? You're worried you're gonna get backed over. Furthermore, I would submit to you, when you open the back doors, when the kids get out of the back seat, where do they tend to go? Out into the street. And when you go to put groceries in the trunk, where are you standing? You're out in the road. Everybody get what we've got here? So, but the business is like that. It's a higher density parking than just parallel parking. It gets more businesses, more cars in, good for the high turnover customer. What could I do to solve those problems and still keep the density of parking? Back in, so I could pull past the spot and back into it? A front out parking, says one of our friends. So I would actually, what you're recommending is that I would have signs like that tell me to pull back and back in, and then leave my nose out, so when I go to pull out, I'm looking at the lane, I'm not going to run over the bicyclist, and when my kids get out and the door's open, where do they go? To the sidewalk, and where I'm putting stuff in the trunk, where am I standing? On the sidewalk. This is actually the standard, no, not just in the communist enclaves of Boulder, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, but Des Moines, Iowa. That's their engineering standard for diagonal parking now. And I tell people I would never stripe a bike lane behind the picture in the top. I would happily stripe one in front of the cars in the bottom. Call it reverse diagonal parking. And here's the real point of my story. Yes, they should do that in downtown. But the real point is when we actually recommend this to local elected officials, what do they say? Their heads sometimes explode in front of me. They actually say, oh, we can never do that here. That's so different. Are you kidding? Our people can never back into spots like that. You know, and then they try to acknowledge me. You know, we got a lot of retirees and older people in our community. They could never back into, which I say, if you've got drivers that can't back into an empty parking space, they sure as blazes shouldn't be backing into an active travel lane. So as an engineer, I am telling you, take out all of your front-end parking. Right? If they can't do the reverse maneuver, don't make them do anything now. What I've done is put the lie to their reaction. What they really just wanted to say was, this is different, I'm unfamiliar with it, and I'm afraid. We get that all the time. It could be this, it could be the trail in my backyard, it could be planting those community gardens, it could be letting people do backyard composting, it's going to smell and bring coyotes, right? Whatever it is, we get the emotional reaction. Our job is to move to an evidence-based response, bring people up the learning curve, and change the conversation. That is our job. Expect the emotional response, respect it, keep people calm, don't blow them off, say let's move through what the evidence tells us, fewer and less severe collisions, safer for bicyclists. Your kids, when you open the doors, your kids will end up on the sidewalk, not out on the road. You put that out there and all of a sudden people are listening, right? They're not so interested in those weird Michael-wearing bicyclists, but you tell me my kids might actually end up on the sidewalk, I'm interested. Everybody with me on this? Okay. Last but not least, I've not done even remote due justice to the whole side of this conversation, but you'll do it over the course of the day regarding nutrition, whether we're talking about good zoning to protect farmland and open space, community gardens, zoning for urban agriculture with things like backyard composting and beekeeping and chickens, regulating, how about this? How about the really wild stuff? Regulating where we allow fast food. How about like Los Angeles County, which essentially collected the data, said we've got enough fast food joints for our population density, we're actually not allowing any more permits for fast food joints anywhere in LA County. Los Angeles County is not permitting McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, talk about no more. They've got enough. Talk about gutsy. Talk about thinking about sort of our children's nutrition in a really innovative way. So these are the 5 elements of healthy community design that I think essentially bring stickiness, the very stickiness that we're talking about. Great website, active living research maintained by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And let me just close by reminding you that, we know we've got to think this way. If the question is, does the free market bring us here? The first thing I'd say is, anybody who studied economics, it was my minor when I studied engineering, knows that first we have to internalize external costs. The market only works if we capture all the costs. Well, we're not capturing the environmental costs, the safety costs, the social inequity costs, the costs to our schools of having to bus kids just a quarter mile because of the big road they have to cross to get to school, right? We're doing that. We're doing that all over the country, all over the region. So we've got to capture those. But then if you ask me, what is the free market saying? The free market's saying we're actually valuing neighborhoods where it's more walk, bike, and transit friendly. That this great study by CEOs for Cities used the WalkScore website. Who's seen WalkScore, by the way? Who knows of it? Everybody should write this down. Write down WalkScore. It's all one word. WalkScore.com. You put any address in the United States, get a score from 1 to 100. It's essentially, it's how many destinations are there within walking distance of that address. But it's a good instrument. It's blunt, but it's good. Here's the point. We're now seeing realty websites connect to the WalkScore website because people are saying to us, I want to buy a house in a more walkable neighborhood. Indeed, this publication called On Common Ground asked the question, What is the next generation of home buyers looking for? And their answer was in-town living, the ability to access public transportation, to walk to a school, to a playground, to a park, to get on a bike trail. Look at the picture, you guys. It's a girl on a bike with a baguette and sunflowers in the back. If I got it, it's like the Netherlands. And this is not a publication of the Sierra Club, it's the National Association of Realtors. They're saying this is what sells. Or if I go to communities all over the country, they're bemoaning their half-vacant malls and big box stores on the edge of town and saying, God, we wish back then when we said yes to this stuff 25 years ago, some of it as little as 10 and 5 years ago, we wish we'd instead invested those dollars in our downtown. Because we know businesses want to locate in communities with more livable, thriving, vibrant centers. That's where because they know they're going to have higher employee retention and indeed lower healthcare costs. And what gives me a better tax rate? We're now starting to see studies that actually compare the tax revenue per square foot, and the downtowns are the winners. Again and again, because those malls out on the edge, there's vast swaths of just concrete that's generating heat and stormwater runoff, all the bad stuff, and not tax revenues. Thank you very much. So how do we get there? Well, I think that what we did yesterday, that walkabout, is the kind of thing. We got to engage people, make them get out and walk it. Hutchinson, Kansas, by the way, I backed into Hutchinson Day where they took their downtown diagonal parking, striped it out, they put out tape and hay bales and stuff. They let people come downtown and back in, tried reverse angle parking, front out parking, and then they gave them t-shirts to say, I backed into Hutchinson if you try it. So they actually doing practical community engagement, letting people try these changes, and then work sessions to plan it, so that we don't force it down people's throats, but it's the evidence, not the emotional, the evidence-based argument. And I'm going to ask all of you to do three things, continue to do three things: speak up, act up, and step up. And with regard to speak up, that's really the first step. We got to convene groups around this. And if I may, let's not talk about the obesity epidemic. Let's talk about those twin epidemics of inactivity and poor nutrition, because that leads you to the very initiatives we're all talking about in here. But I'd even say you need to create a team. The successful communities I've seen have a compact team of about 10 people with, because you do the list and you say, well, my God, you got everybody on the list. That's too many to have in a team. So I'd say make a compact team, starting with health and planning and transportation folks, but obviously quickly you're going to recognize, oh my God, I need all these others. I want the Heart Association of Cancer Society, I want elected officials, neighborhood associations in the Y, big employers in the hospital, those wacky bicycle and pedestrian advocates, yes, even them. How do I do that? Well, here's what I see. I see communities instead creating a compact team of about 10 that really get this across disciplines, not just sustainability folks, not just economic development folks, not just health folks, across. And three things to be on my team, three criteria. One, you embrace the vision of sticky design. Two, you can do this work as part of your job. I don't want to have to beg the Public Works Department to stripe the bike lanes. I want to have the person who's in charge of striping the roads on my team, because they're the ones that are going to decide whether we use bike lanes or not. And three, they're the people of reach and influence that can bring in the larger group when you need it. So if you're thinking, if you're leaving here, going back to your community, say, how do we get going? This is a good first step. Create that compact, truly interdisciplinary team. So those are, again, my three criteria. Embrace the vision of stickiness, active design, part of the job responsibilities, and good community influence. By the way, if somebody walks in and says, hey, let's do bike to work week, I throw them off the team. I don't want a one-week event. It's not sticky. I want to know how you're going to change downtown bicycle parking for people who bike to work all the time, not just once in a while. And then I would turn you to this article in a journal called Childhood Obesity. I wish it was titled Childhood Physical Activity and Nutrition. They asked me to do an article on what I think the big initiatives are nationally that are leading the change here. And these are the big five. We'll talk about them more in the breakout, so I'm not going to do detail now. I'm happy to share more if you're interested. But it's about what we're doing with our planning and zoning, complete streets, trail networks that are not just for recreation, but transportation. So for example, we need to be talking about keeping our schools in town, not going to the cheap land on the edge, neighborhood corner stores. Or how about this very cool Barnes & Noble that didn't end up out on the perimeter big box strip in Terre Haute, but is the bookstore for Indiana State, right next to campus, and it's multi-story with offices and housing above. That's what I like to see. Let's think about not permitting that. That McDonald's, that's 3 blocks from us. That looks suburbia. That looks like suburbia. It's 3 blocks from us in the core. We should not be building that in downtown South Bend. We should never be permitting that. Complete streets, it is a central question for you here right now. Are you going to say yes to designing roads for all 4 users, pedestrian, bicyclist, transit, and motor vehicles? Keeping in mind that for those who say it's going to cost too much, one of the best things we can do is just do it when we're doing routine maintenance anyway. It's not the end of the world to say, when we're repaving, when we've dug up a road for sewers anyway, that's the time to add the bike lane, to possibly widen the sidewalk, put in the curb extension. And you know, a great example of that, we crossed the Jefferson Avenue Bridge yesterday on our walk audit. There is just no reason that needs to have all those lanes for the landing of a 747 on the bridge. You don't have to dedicate all that asphalt just to the car. I would submit to you, with paint, the next time they pave or paint out there, they could turn that into a more bicycle and pedestrian space by creating a bike lane on the edge that now buffers the pedestrian, one travel lane, and a turn lane in the middle. It's just not that hard to do once we decide that's a priority. My main street in the small town where I work, State Department of Transportation, this is in upstate New York where I grew up. DOT said we're going to improve Main Street. What improve meant was more lanes, wider. Thankfully, their local sustainability group, you guys in that town, came in and said, actually we prefer that, and that's what they got. They got bike lanes, they got curb extensions, they got more pedestrian friendly. Trail networks. We're out there building these great recreational trails out in the middle of nowhere, but if you look at the data, what are the most used sections of trails? They are the pieces that are well connected to other parts of the transportation network, sidewalks, bike lanes, transit stops, and they get you to destinations, schools and shopping and so on. One of the really nice things, by the way, be prepared when you go to do trails. The NIMBYs are going to be there, not in my backyard. The bananas build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, right? And you guys know who the cave people are, right? Citizens against virtually everything. There you show up. They're all going to tell you the trail's horrible, the mustache man in my backyard, I don't want it. No, don't allow that. And it's funny because Harry Tyrwell shared with me this great map of a planned trail connection from Niles right across the state border, God forbid, trail. But what he said in the email to me that I so appreciated, Harry, was, I really think of this as a spine, and what I really wanted to do is generate the spurs, the little neighborhood connectors, like this one that we saw in Greenfield that connects a residential neighborhood to a park off in the distance there, and the sign even tells you that. This pathway gets you. That's where the win comes with trails, when they get you to destinations. You guys are all thinking about, we talked about the bike-friendly communities. So glad that South Bend is a bronze. It should become a silver and then a gold. Your university campuses should both get bike-friendly campus awards. The League of American Bicyclists actually does these awards. They look at campuses. They look at businesses. Find a couple of your leading businesses. Why isn't the hospital here pursuing a bike-friendly rating? Your transit system here, Transpo is a good example of, I think, progressive thinking. I love the LEED Platinum building that we were able to be in last night, but I've got to say, what I really was excited to hear them talking about is fixed route service with defined stops, increasing the service. The fact that right now they've already got a student ID program where automatically Notre Dame and St. Mary's students, their IDs, faculty and staff, act as a pass, so they're essentially building a ready usership built into the system. And last but not least, safe routes to school. This is an area showing great promise when we still have downtown or in-town or neighborhood schools. But I will give you the example of Columbia, Missouri, where they were doing these great events, walk the school day events, the picture on the top, a walking school bus. It was all great, but there were parents who were not letting their kids walk to school because of the traffic in front of the school. They said, therefore I have to drive my kid, thereby inducing more traffic in front of the school, right? The parents. So, Nancy, we did walk audits, we worked with the kids, we had a focus group, we worked with parents and the city mayor. We found a park right next to the school, beautiful trail. They actually said, what if the cars all dropped off on the other side of the park, and the buses, the kids who come by car and bus got to walk, and we actually set up a system that encouraged them to do that by putting in place not just a one-day event, not just a nice trail through the park, but they planted a community garden and a 5-minute delay on the cars that stopped in front of the school. They froze those cars, and they said, we're going to let all the pedestrians and bicyclists leave first. Then you can pick up. But if your kid's at the far end of the park, while they were walking through the park, you can pick them up right after school. So we heard kids saying to their parents, don't pick me up at school. The kids who walk get out an hour early. It was a 5-minute delay. But to a kid at the end of the school, that's infinity. It was, this is important, the policy change that made all the difference. Putting that rule in place that created the incentive for walk and bike, right, was really what shifted behavior. I'm a raving froth at the mouth lunatic about this. I am begging you, if you do nothing else, to do the last of my 3 things, which is to step up, to do it by your own behavior. In the picture on the right from Columbus, Indiana, I'm not so impressed by those joggers. I'm impressed by the guy riding his bike for a functional trip. I'm impressed by the parent in the picture on the left there, walking to pick up the 2 kids at school and walk them home. That's the story. That's the story. Build it into your day as part of your daily trip. I mean, yes, go ahead and jog if you do that stuff. But it is about changing our behavior, our essential behavior every day. And I'm a raving lunatic for all these reasons that we've talked about, air quality and our dependence on foreign oil and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that stuff's important, local economic development, all the things we'll talk about all day. But I'll tell you this concluding story to tell you how I know it's going to work. This guy crossing a bridge in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Bridge connected downtown Harrisburg to an island called City Island Park. This park was a former, it's got on it a minor league baseball diamond, it's got a zoo, a playground, and the bridge use was a former motor vehicle bridge, couldn't carry cars, so they turned it into a bike pedestrian bridge. And there's another bridge that takes the cars out there now. I say, can I take your picture? Yeah. He says, sure, go ahead. I say, you get a lot of exercise because of this bridge? What a cool place to walk, and there's a trail along the river. He goes, no, not really. I said, well, where are you going? He goes, oh, I parked my car out on the island. What do you mean? He goes, oh, well, the baseball diamond, the games are all at night, so I can park there all day for $1. Where are you coming from? Downtown by the state capitol. Why don't you park there? Oh, they charge like $7, $8 a day. Plus, they've done this thing called traffic calming where they narrow the lanes. And do you know what that is? I said, yeah, I know a little about that. And he said, so he said, so it's just easier to park here and walk. How long does it take you? Maybe 15 minutes each way. How often do you do that? And I'm thinking he's going to say once a year, I've got to go get a license renewed or something. Every day I work down there. Now I said to the guy, do you get any exercise because of the bridge? What did he say? How much physical activity is he getting? 30 minutes a day. So here he is, meeting the recommendation, yet he doesn't think it's exercise. He thinks he's saving $7 a day on parking, which is fine with me. I don't care. Nor do I care if he loses a pound. Because here's what I know about this guy. He'll be at reduced risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. He will make fewer healthcare claims. He'll be absent from work less often. He will cost his employer less, and therefore me, because I'm in the same insurance pool with him. We get all those wins. Plus, he's not driving downtown, so we're reducing his greenhouse gas footprint. We don't have to park his car down in the court. We get all these wins out of him, and he doesn't think he's doing any of that, which is fine. I don't care. And it's not because of a great program, an encouragement program. Please, walk and park your car and walk to work. No, it's because we made it cheap to park on the island, a policy change, right? And we made the infrastructure easy for him to do it, right? No t-shirts and water bottles involved. If I was smart, I'd go to where he would work, I'd give a bunch of people pedometers, and I'd say, hey, we're trying to get another 2,000 steps in our day. You should try walking. Hey, by the way, did you know Bob found $1 parking out on the island? You ought to try that. Do it for a week, I'll give you a t-shirt. Do it for a month, I'll give you a water bottle, okay? And I'll get you addicted to 75, whatever it is, $35 a month back in your pocket. A week, and $140 a month. I'm a raving lunatic, quite frankly, not for this guy, and not for any of you. Well, no, for some of you. I see some young people in the room, because that's who we've got to be doing it for. Not for us, but for the next generation. Those are my kids, 15 and 18 now. I've frozen them in time at 3 and 5. When they were very cute. Because they are the first generation that's going to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than their parents because of diseases of sedentary living. Because we built a world where they can't be free range like we were. We know this is true. You told me at the beginning. We were free range. They aren't. It's not good for them. I got all the data in the world if you want to talk about it more. But the reality is you know it in your hearts. We know how to build places that are stickier, healthier, more sustainable, where they can be free range kids. I challenge you to go do it. I challenge you to make the communities right here in this region models. Because frankly, we can't keep talking about the Seattles and the Portlands and the Boulders. They're great. We need models from right here in the heartland. So thank you for the good work you're already doing. Keep it up. I look forward to an exciting day. It's a privilege to talk to you. Let's go build a world for free range kids.
If you're a raving lunatic, then I think we all want to be in the asylum. Am I right?
That's it.
So we'll take 2 questions here for Mark. Microphones are in the back. Raise your hand.
They're exhausted. They're just exhausted.
Oh, sorry, in the back.
Not yet. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. As a fellow free-range kid, I applaud your attitude on this stuff. A couple questions. One is, how do you, it sounds like you're in neighborhood of neighborhood schools, how do you do that without dismantling the federally mandated busing? And then number 2, how do you feel about video games and how do you get kids to unplug from them?
So quick on the video game thing, I think we've missed up cause and effect. The more and more we start to look at that, I'm not entirely convinced that kids are begging to sit indoors all the time. In many cases, we have some evidence that sort of we've used screen time as a adjunct caregiver, right? People will tell their kids sit inside, watch TV because it's easier than me worrying about the scary world that's out there, right? So I think that rebuilding the outdoor world so that that they can be free range again is one of the best ways to attack the screen time issue. That's a gross simplification, but I really do think we have to be careful not to just assume that kids are begging us to sit in front of the screen for 5 hours a day. I will tell you this, the data tells us one of the best correlates of childhood physical activity is time spent outdoors. So the simplest thing you can do is just kick them outside, and I think parents have not been doing that for 25 years. They just kind of gave up on that idea. So short answer on that. Regarding the school thing, we see states starting to reevaluate what their school siting requirements are. I think we should be exploring that in detail. Why do we have acreage requirements that make us go to the cheap land on the edge of town? I think when we do the analysis of consolidation and moving to new properties, we should build long-term transportation costs. We're back to the same thing we were talking about before. Not just the short-term immediate benefit. It was the cost of the land for the new school. Well, the new land on the edge of town is much cheaper. What's it going to cost you to bus kids to that school for 1 million years? And with regard to sort of desegregation-based busing, I'm seeing communities sort of move back upstream and say, well, why did we do that? Because quality was so different, because our neighborhoods weren't diverse. So the real only answer to that is work back toward more diverse neighborhoods and make sure the quality is equitable so that we don't have to do the required busing to sort of bring equity back to our schools, right? Solve the fundamental problem rather than try to fight the busing problem. That's a simple answer, but it's where the schools that I've been working in Milwaukee, where we were doing that, that's where they were successful. They went back to neighborhood-based schools that were of such high quality, they became community centers of health and wellness, and everybody was happy to be assigned back to their neighborhood school, as an example. I mean, that was the model. That was the model.
Am I on? Okay. There's a lovely hotel, an old vacant hotel downtown, and every time there's any discussion about what its new use might be, there's always a barrier related to parking. That it could be
right.
Apartment building, no parking. It's a hotel, no parking. So how would you respond to that?
That it's baloney. I would be much stronger, however. I would use worse language. I mean, so you're overparked in this downtown. So maybe you got to do a parking study to prove that. I mean, I just saw acres and acres of empty surface parking, garages where the parking is being given away for free. And I would say to the opponents, I would say, so you're probably a free market guy. You think the market ought to work, right? The people who sort of are worried about that are somewhat traditional. I'll say, good. Let's actually just start charging what the cost of parking really is. There's a land value associated with those buildings. So let's charge the actual cost of that parking, and let's see what it takes to fill it up. In other words, I think that the parking has truly been the tail that's wagged the dog. And you got to, again, move upstream to the bigger question of how much parking do you need for this entire core, not by individual parcel. Look for complementary uses. So there are a bunch of tools in the toolkit. We know how to do it better, and we have to call out, if I may use the term bullshit, on the people that are just using that as an excuse not to address that one building. Because what they're doing is trying to use the technical brush off on one parcel, and it's completely inappropriate. So that's the short answer. I mean, again, you got to talk about and make them do an evidence-based argument. Show me the evidence that we don't have enough parking in the core. Data. Show me the data, man. I'm an inner engineer. That's what I want to see. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mark Fenton.